ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। शांति शांति शांति। Namaskar my dear friends, this is video number 4 on Panchadasi of Bharti Tirtha Vidyarnaya. This is chapter number 3, Inquiry into the 5 seats, Panchakosha Viveka Prakarana. First part, the method of synthesis. The problem of method is vital to every system of metaphysics. The results of a philosophical inquiry depend not a little on the method that a philosopher adopts. The method and the material are interdependent. If we may make use of a Kantian distinction, we may say that method without material is barren, while matter without method is blind. Descartes is called the father of modern philosophy because of his innovation in the field of metaphysical methodology. Kant called himself the Copernicus of philosophy because of the unique epistemology that he gave to the world. The diversity of our opinions, say Descartes, is not because some are more reasonable than others, but only because we conduct our thought by different ways and do not consider the same things. Of all the different ways of approach, the most important are the objective and the subjective methods. Those metaphysical systems which pursue the objective path land themselves in crass materialism and atheism. Though Descartes began with the method of universal doubt and started his metaphysics with the postulate cogito ergo sum, he relinquished this position with actually building the superstructure of his system. The mathematical method of the Cartesian philosophers is mainly an objective method. It is because of this method that even Spinozism lends itself to a materialistic interpretation. In the East, the Vaiseshika system makes use for the most part of the objective method. With its analytic way of classifying the various phenomena of the universe, it leaves us with an infinite number of finite particulars. But particulars cannot be the ultimate realia. The billiard ball universe will satisfy no thorough seeker of truth. Of late, this objective method has invaded even the realm of psychology. The behaviorist materializes the mind, makes it a shadow of the flesh, and explains its functions in terms of physics and physiology. The subjective method is equally one-sided, and if pursued to its logical conclusion, would lead to subjectivism and skepticism. The history of the English empiricist school bears witness to this fact. The psychological method, which Locke inaugurated, led logically to the phenomenalistic pluralism and skepticism of David Hume. The Buddha's way in the East was to a great extent subjective and psychological. Though he was launched upon his career of philosophic thought by an objective observation of human misery, insofar as his aim was to discover the cause and the cure of sorrow, The Buddha had to choose the subjective method of introversion and psychological analysis, and a thoroughgoing method of this kind involved him naturally in the position of a methodological agnosticism. There are certain systems which employ both the objective and the subjective methods, but in an unsynthesized fashion. The Sankhya system, pursuing the objective method, traces all the manifold of sense perception to the primal source, Pradhana or Prakriti, the prius of creation, and through the subjective method of inquiry, it arrives at a plurality of Purushas. Because of a lack of synthesis, the Sankhya is left with Prakriti as opposed to Purusha, and one Purusha as distinct from another. Though the Vaisesika speaks of substances which are infinite like the Atma and the Akasas, it is illogical for the system to hold the view of a plurality of infinites. The Upanishadic method is a synthesis of the objective and the subjective ways of metaphysical approach to truth. The term Adhyatmika and Adhidevika occur often and in a successive order in the Upanishads. The cosmic ether is spoken of as identical with the ether of the heart. He who is in the Purusha and he who is in the cosmic ether is spoken of as identical with the ether of the heart. He who is in the Purusha and he who is in the sun is one, says the Taittiriya Upanishad. Uddalaka in the Chandogya Upanishad instruct his son how from the Sat one only without a second the world sprang forth. After describing in detail the process of the objective manifestation of the self of the universe, Uddalaka turns with a dramatic swiftness and says that the universal self is identical with the self of Shvetaketu, his son, that which is that subtle essence, the root of all. In it all that exists has itself. It is the true, it is the self, and thou, O Shvetaketu, art that. This is a typical instance of the synthetic method of the Upanishads and of the system of Vedanta, which has its roots in them. It is through this method that the Advaitins reach the unitary absolute, which can be characterized neither as objective nor as subjective. And Bharata Tirtha Vidyaranya, who is one of the ablest exponents of the post-Sanskara Advaita, wields this weapon of synthesis in an excellent and eminent manner. In the second chapter, he adopts the objective method and discriminates the Sat from the elements and their evolutes. The Sat is shown to be distinct from the Mahabhutas and their modifications. In the third chapter, Panchakosa Viveka, Bharata Tirtha Vidyaranya establishes through a subjective analysis that the self is not a psycho-physical organism, that the sight of the Atma is not to be lost in the sheaths that seem to encase it. Heading 2. The Taittiriya Inquiry. The Panchakosa Viveka Prakarana bases its arguments on the Taittiriya Upanishad, taking the cue from the text of the Brahmanda Valli. Yo Veda Nihitam Guhyam Pare Vyam Sosanute Sarvam Kaman Saha. He who knows it placed in the innermost recess, the transcendental Akasa, realizes all his desires with the omniscient Brahma. After defining Brahma as Satyam, Jnanam and Anantam, existence, knowledge and infinity, the Brahmanda Valli proceeds to say that Brahma is not ordinarily realized as such because it is hidden in the cavity of the seats, which are products of the unmanifest Akasa. In this cavity are hidden all the substances in all the three times because it is the cause and it is exceedingly subtle. Brahma is placed within this cavity. The seats veil the Atma from our view, and it can be realized only when the veils are lifted. The Brahmandavalli of the Taittiriya Upanishad, which seeks to show with the help of knowledge that the individual self is a Brahma which is within and beyond the five seats, beginning with that made of food and ending with that made of bliss, goes on to extract the substance within by divesting it of the five seats formed by ignorance, just as we should remove the manchafe coverings from a Kodrava grain. By this process of discrimination, the self is realized to be separate from the seeds. The coverings are the creations of ignorance. When the night of nescience is dispelled through the light of knowledge, the Atma is realized to be the only reality. The Bhargu Valli illustrates this principle by means of the story of Bhargu, the son of Varuna. Bhargu implored his father to teach him the knowledge of Brahma. Varuna gave his son a formula and asked him to find out Brahma for himself. That from which he said, these beings are born, that by which being born these beings live, and that they enter into at the end know that is Brahma. Applying this formula, Bhargu found out that Anna, Prana, Manas and Vijnana could not satisfy the definition. He slowly penetrated deeper and deeper till he learned the innermost Ananda to be Brahma. The Atma is not the physical body made of food. It is not the psychical self with its volitional, emotional and cognitional activities. It is not even the bliss of sleep which is a product of ignorance. The Atma is beyond the five seats, the modes of Maya. That is heading number 3, the five seats. We have already said that the third chapter of the Panchadasi is an elucidation of the Taittiriya Upanishads, where the Atma is described as hidden in the cavity of the five seats. The grossest of the seats is the Annamaya, the physical body made of food. Pranamaya is the seat of the vital airs and it is the energizer of the body. Manamaya Kosa is the seat of the mind, subtler than that is the Vijnanamaya, the seat of the intellect with the power of cognition, and the subtlest of all is the Anandamaya, the seat of enjoyment enveloped in a ignorance. These five seats lie one within the other in a serial order, and that which is within takes on the form of that which is without, like mercury that is poured into a crucible. The Annamaya seat is born of the food assimilated by the parents and it is sustained by food alone. This physical seat is not the Atma, for it comes into being at one moment and goes out of existence at another. That which is born is bound to perish, and that which perishes cannot be real. If the physical body is considered to be the Atma, then this body was not existent in the previous life. Yet in this life we reap the results of our past karma. The agent is denied, but still we observe the fruit of his actions. This would involve us in the fallacy known as akarta bhyagama, the influx of the unacquired. This body will not continue to exist in the next life. If the body were identical with the Atma, there would be none to enjoy in the life to come. The effects of the deeds done in the present life, since this body will be non-existent, then there occurs the defects of karta, karta nasa, or the destruction of the acquired. The seed of food is a modification of Maya. It cannot be the Atma, which is the supreme intelligence. The Pranamaya Kosha is the vitalizer of the physical body. It gives strength to it, impels the various senses to their respective functions. Even this seed of prana cannot be the Atma, for it is inert, devoid of intelligence. The self is not a biological phenomenon. It is not an incessant flow of force, an unceasing stream of activity. It is absurd to speak of the self as pure duration or as the vital impulse. The Atma is not an empirical category like that of the biologist. It is very often said that the self is the mind, the idea. The mental sheath is that which identifies itself with the body and considers itself to be possessing a house, children, etc. The mind is subject to changing passions and passing moods, and so it cannot be the self. That which is a victim of modification cannot be the changeless Atma. Change implies imperfection and inherent want. The Atma is immutable and perfect. It is not the mind, it is not the finite monad of Leibniz or of James Ward. The Manas is the Ichha Shakti or the power of desire. In the Atma there can be no desire, for it is Purna Kama, the fulfillment of all desires. The intellect, which is a reflection of the supreme intelligence, remains dormant in sleep, and on awakening it fills the body up to the fingertips. It is the doer of all deeds, possessing the power of cognition. It is the Vijnanamaya Kosha and not the Atma. The intellect does not function in abnormal minds or during sleep. It is a victim to the vicissitudes of the time, and hence it cannot be the supertemporal. While enjoying the fruits of good deeds, there is a certain moods of the mind turned inward, which is a reflection of Ananda. When that enjoyment ends, it rests in the form of sleep. This mood of the mind is termed Anandmaya, the sheath of the enjoyment. It is not the self, for it exists only at certain times. Interpreting Maya as Prachurya, fullness, and theistic interpreters of the Vedanta and even the Vartikara who preceded Sankara identify the Anandmaya Atma with the Supreme Self. Anandmaya is fullness of felicity, and this, according to them, can only be the highest self. But this way of interpreting the Taittiriya text does not suit the context. As Sankara observes in his commentary, Anandamaya Atma is an effect and not the unconditioned Atma. Ananda, bliss, is the fruit of knowledge and karma. Anandamaya is that which is made of that bliss, but this Ananda is not the supreme bliss, which is Atma. It is only an effect of karma and knowledge. The Anandmaya is within the sheath made of knowledge. The termination Mayat is here used in the sense of modification or change, as in the case of Annamaya, etc. Further, the Upanishad states that the Anandmaya is reached some karmana, Reaching is possible only of the things which are not Atma and which are effects by nature. The word Anandmaya occurs in a context where the other seeds are described. Annamaya is a modification of food, and so Anandmaya must also be a modification of Ananda. It cannot itself be Ananda. Further, scripture attributes the head, hands, the trunk, and so on to the Anandmaya Brahma. But Brahma itself, which is the uncaused cause of all things, cannot have limbs. It is also said that Brahma is the sporting tail of the seat. That which needs a sport cannot itself be the prop of all things. Hence, Anandmaya cannot be the unconditioned Atma. It is only the reflection of the bliss which is Atma. The original which is reflected is the Supreme Self of the nature of bliss. Heading 4. The Self. The universal self is defined in the Taittiriya text as Satyam, Jnanam and Anantam, existence, knowledge and infinitude. The bliss which is reflected in the Anandmaya is the Atma, since it is eternal and everlasting. That whose nature by which it is cognized does not change is Satyam, truth. That whose nature by which it is determined changes is Antram or false. The bliss which is the Atma is eternal and it is Satyam. The five seeds have been characterized as Anantam, Anatman, not self. The Anmaya is not the Atman because it is a modification of food. It has only a model existence. The Pranmaya is not the self, since it is unintelligent and inert. It is blind force, a mere strife and striving. The Manamaya is not the Atma, for it is also a mode. It undergoes ceaseless change. The Vijnanamaya is not the self because it ceases to function in sleep and other abnormal states. And the bliss of sleep cannot be the Atma since it is not permanent. Thus it is clear that the seeds cannot be the self. But the seeds are experienced while the Atma is not experienced. How then can something which is not experienced be posited to exist? True, the Anandmaya and all other seeds are experienced and nothing else is so experienced, but there must be something which, though itself being unexperienced, makes all other experience possible, and that is the Atma. If it is an object of experience, then there must be something else to experience it, and so on ad infinitum. So the Atma cannot be an object of experience. It is the substratum of all experience because it is itself experience. It is not a fact of experience because it is itself experience. It is not a fact of experience, and because there is nothing apart from it to know it, it is not an object of knowledge. Where there is duality, there one perceives another, one smells another, one tastes another, one contacts another, knows another, but where all this is Atma, who is there to think, touch and know whom? Who can know him by whom all this is known? Who can know the knower? Because the Atma is not an object of experience, it is non-existent. It is not a known object of experience like the horns of a hare or the son of a barren woman. Nor is it like a pot which is not an object of experience when it is hidden by non-cognition. It is self-resplendent experience, and hence it is not an experienced object. The substances like sugar which transmit their qualities to others have no desire to enjoy those qualities themselves, nor is there any other substance which can impart to them those traits. The self is itself experience, it needs no other experiencer for its existence. It is self-luminous, and hence it requires no other external source of illumination. Even prior to all these words, it shines. It is after its effulgence that all shine. The world is made luminous by its light. Here in this dream state, the self is self-luminous. It shines prior to all this objective universe. When he shines, everything shines after him by his light. All this is lighted. These texts of scripture declare the self-luminosity of the Atma. Yajnavalkya says to Maitreyi, who can cognize that by which everything is cognized? By whom can the knower be known? The mind, which is the instrument of knowledge, can grasp only external objects. It cannot know the knower, even as the chisel cannot understand the carpenter. The Atma can be known neither by speech nor by the mind. It cognizes the objects, and there is none else who cognizes it. The real, which is of the nature of intelligence, is different from the known and the unknown. It is neither manifest world of name and form which is presented to the senses, nor is it the unmanifest Maya, unrevealed to sense perception. It is neither the moods of Maya nor Maya itself. The experience of self-consciousness is an undeniable fact. Even to deny, there must be the one who denies. Doubt implies a doubter, just as the words "have I a tongue or not" are a source of ridicule. Even so is the statement, the Chaitanya is not known by me, it is to be known. When all the objects of the world of which there is knowledge are discarded, the pure consciousness which remains uncontradicted is Brahma. The witness Jnanam, Jnana is realized in its self-nature after the relinquishment of the five seats. To say that only Shunya remains when the seats are discarded is impossible. Self-existence cannot become a matter of controversy. Nobody doubts his own existence. Descartes, who began doubting everything, could not doubt his own existence. Cogito ergo sum is the first postulate of his philosophy. The dictum is not at the fag end of a syllogistic process. Self-knowledge is far too primitive and simple to admit of an ergo. If the I am depends on an I think, the I think must also depend on another ergo, and so on. And it will land us in infinite regress. The man who calls this syllogism, says Hegel, must know little more about a syllogism, save that the word ergo occurs in it. Where shall we look for the middle term? It was as a self-evident or immediate truth that the cogito ergo sum, the maximum on which the whole history of modern philosophy was built, was stated by its author. It is not an inference but the expression of a unique fact. In self-consciousness, thought and existence are indissolubly united. As for our existence, says Locke, we perceive it so plainly and so certainly that it neither needs nor is capable of proof. In Kant, the transcendental unity of appreciation is the central postulate. All knowledge and logic start with this first principle of self-certainty. Self-knowledge is inseparable from self-existence. Sankara says that self-knowledge, which is neither logical nor sensory, is the presupposition of every other kind of cognition. It is beyond proof since it is the basis of all proof. If a person asserts that Brahma is unreal, then he is predicating his own unreality, for he is no other than Brahma. The self is indescribable. It is not an object of sense. It cannot be known through logical reasoning. Though it is not cognized, it is intimately intuited. Spinoza describes intuitive knowledge or sensia intuition as consisting not in being coincided by reason but in an immediate union with the thing itself. Pascal makes a distinction between two ways of thinking, the mathematical esprit geometric and the finer, nobler way, esprit de finesse. It is only the latter kind of knowledge that can take us to the ultimate truth. Truth is lived and not known. Intuition is integral knowing, synthetic insight. It is neither immediate sensation nor mediated thought. It is the highest kind of experience, the experience of self. Because the Atma, without being an object of sense, is immediately intuitive, it is self-luminous and self-relieving. We have already said that the Atma is defined by scripture as Satyam, Jnanam and Anantam. The self is real, intelligent and infinite. The adjuncts are intended to define and not to qualify the Atma. A qualification serves to distinguish the qualified from all others of the same species. A definition, on the other hand, serves to distinguish the defined from the whole world. The self is real since it is the substratum of all changes. Being is reality, becoming is unreal. This may be construed as tantamount to saying that Brahma is the cause and hence also inert like clay. To meet this objection, scripture declares that the Atma is knowledge, pure consciousness. The word Jnanam means knowledge and not having knowledge, for it is an adjunct of the word Atma. The Buddhists also admit that the real is consciousness, but their conception of intelligence is that it is momentary and moving. The Sanika Vijanandvada holds the Vijnana or consciousness is perpetual movement, ceaseless change, but the Atma cannot be reduced to change and movement. It cannot be a flux. So scripture adds that the self is not only reality and consciousness but also infinity anantam, that is real which cannot be sublated. Non-contradiction is the mark of reality, as contradiction is the sign of unreality. Bradley says ultimate reality is such that it does not contradict itself. Here is an absolute criterion. Our standard denies inconsistency and therefore asserts consistency. If we can be sure that the inconsistent is unreal, we must logically be just as sure that the Reality is consistent. Reality is known to possess character, but this character is at present determined only as that which excludes contradiction. In sleep and samadhi, the gross and the subtle universes are negated, but the self remains as the witness of the negation. There is no state or moment in which the self ceases to be the witness. It is nowhere contradicted. Hence, it is the real. When the various objects are removed from a room, the formless ether remains. Even so, that which remains when all things are negated is the self. If it is said that nothing is left when everything is contradicted, there must be at least that consciousness which knows that nothing remains. It is this consciousness that is termed in the Vedanta as the Atma. Call it Sunya or Sakshi. The self confronts us as the most stubborn fact. There can be a difference only in the words which are uttered to define the absolute. All attempts to define it are bound to be futile. It is on account of the inherent contradiction of finite words that scripture, instead of describing what the Atma is, proclaim what is not. This method is sometimes spoken of as being defective and barren. Oldenburg, in his work on the Upanishads, makes a distinction between the Upanishadic philosophy and the Kantian metaphysics, and suggests as parallel to the former the teachings of Plotinus, the Sufis, and the Christian mystics like Eckhart. But he forgets that the cognoscendo ignorari of Augustine, the neti neti of Yajnavalkya, the whether dies not depths of Eckhart are far more sure indexes of spiritual humility and consequent possession of reality than the self-satisfied and half-halting dictates of an agnosticism on the grounds of pure reason, which must destroy knowledge in order to make room for faith. The method of negation is not really one of bare negation without significance. All that can be characterized as being of this nature can be relinquished as unreal. The Atma cannot be particularized, it can be described only as being not this. Thus we have seen that the self is reality and pure consciousness. Infinity is threefold: infinity in space, in time, and in substance. Akasa is a spatial infinity, but it is limited by time and other substances. The self transcends time and it is not limited by any other thing. Because it is all pervasive, it is not conditioned by the space. Because of its eternal nature, it is not crushed by time. Since it is not different from anything else, it is not limited by other substances. It is eternal, all pervasive, the substratum of all things, the subtlest of the subtle. Like ether, it penetrates all and is eternal. It is the eternal of all eternals, the supreme spirit of all sentient things. All this is indeed Brahma. Brahma is all this. Space, time, and other objects are unreal modifications of Maya, and there can be no limitation caused to Brahma by them. Fifth heading: the self is Brahma. The Atma is identical with Brahma. That Atma, the real, is Brahma itself. Brahma is the Atma. There is nothing to be doubted here. The Parnava, the real, is Atma alone. The Atma which is Narsimha is Brahma. The Atma is called Narsimha by scripture because it is the destroyer of the bonds of the humans who are crippled by transmigrated life. The self is Brahma. The universal and the unitary self appears to be split up as Iswara and the Jiva, but in the reality, the Iswartva and the Jivatva Jivtva are unreal superimpositions of the adjuncts with Maya and the five seeds. The seeds were shown to be modifications of Maya. The Maya Shakti belongs to Iswara. It produces the world, regulates and governs it. Because of the reflection of intelligence in it, it seems to possess consciousness. It appears to be alive and animating. Brahma seems to attain Iswartva because of its apparent association with the Shakti. When the five seeds are superimposed on the self, it becomes the Jiva, the empirical self. But the principle which appears as Iswara when it is in association with Maya and as the Jiva due to the superimposition of the seeds is the same Brahma. This is comparable to a person becoming father to one and grandfather to another. Apart from the son and the grandson, that person is neither the father nor the grandsire. When we discard Maya and its effect and perceive their non-reality, Brahma is realized to be pure and infinite. One who knows Brahma thus becomes Brahma. The knower of Brahma reaches the highest. Reaching Brahma is realizing it to be oneself. He who knows for certain the Supreme Brahma realizes that he is himself Brahma. The self is not born and nor does it perish. And since the knower of Brahma is identical with it, he escapes the cycles of birth and death. Never does he return to this empirical existence. So, this chapter number 3 is completed, and thereby this video is also completed, and I stops the video here. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Next video number 5 will start with chapter 4. Chapter 4, Inquiry into the World of Duality, Dvaita Viveka Parakarna. So thanks, Namaskar my dear friend. Please subscribe the channel. Namaskar.